Can my AI life coach chatbot help coach me, a life coach, in my marriage? Let's see what it's got. Now, let me dump my thoughts into the chat and see what happens. Okay, thank you. I'd like to start a new coaching conversation. This time, I'd like to talk about my marriage. I've noticed that I'm looking for a lot of words of affirmation from him, reassurances, compliments, acknowledgement of my contributions in the household and to our family and to him. But when he says them, they fall flat inside me. It's like I'm not receiving them or they're not enough, even when he's saying the things I need to hear. What is going on with me? Let's see what it says. What you're describing is actually a really important and common inner experience in long-term relationships. The key signal in what you said is you want the words, but when they arrive, they don't land. Okay, so first off the bat, I'm going to interrupt this response and say the ironic thing is it's giving me words of affirmation right off the bat. So maybe it's reading into what I'm saying by giving me affirmation, but it's a little bit too much talking for my personal preference. Anyway, let's move on. That usually means the issue isn't actually the amount of affirmation. It's something happening inside the receiving system. True. There are a few possibilities we can explore here, but instead of me diagnosing it, let's stay in the coaching frame you asked for and uncover it from your own awareness. Thank you. Here's the first question. When he gives you the affirmation you were hoping for, what is the very first thought that flashes through your mind? It might be subtle or quick. Something like, he's just saying that because he asked, he doesn't really mean it, it's not enough. Why didn't you notice this earlier? What tends to appear there for you? Interesting. Okay, so if you saw the previous clip where it coached me about fulfilling my creative cup, I mentioned that all coaching conversations need to start by establishing the goal of the client, which again, it does not do here, probably because I didn't program it adequately enough. So I will be adding that in after this episode, but I wanted to mention it in case you're watching this clip by itself. This question just jumps right into the content of the conversation. And what I appreciate about it is that it's asking about my unconscious response, which is really helpful awareness building. So we'll go with that. Some version of he's just saying that because I asked, or he doesn't really mean it, depending on if it's acknowledging my accomplishments for the day or week, or if he's complimenting me or saying, I love you out of the blue. That's a really honest observation. The moment you said that, something important became visible. The affirmation is arriving, but your mind is disqualifying it before it can land. So let's get curious about the part of you that does that. Here's the next question. If his words were completely genuine and fully true, if there were zero doubt about that, what would it feel like inside you to actually let them in? I like that somatic question. I feel like it's connecting me to my body and putting me in future-oriented thinking. So I think it would feel like I have to pause for like 10 plus seconds to actually look into his eyes, play back the tape in my head, so to speak, and wait for them to sink in. Like I'd have to wait for that inner rejection to pass and then let them in. But who has the time for that? That's a really revealing answer. You didn't say, I can't receive it. You said, I would need time to let it in, which means the problem may not be disbelief alone. It may be speed. Your nervous system and your mind are moving quickly through the moment, and the affirmation needs slowness to actually register. Instead, the brain inserts a shortcut thought. He's just saying that. So let's explore that layer deeper. Here's the next question. If you did pause those 10 seconds and let the affirmation fully land, what part of you might feel vulnerable or exposed? Interesting, because it's trying to lead me somewhere by telling me that a part of me feels vulnerable and exposed, which is not skilled coaching. You never want to put words in someone's mouth or prescribe someone else's experience if they didn't explicitly say that that was their experience. I get what it's trying to do in saying that I'm protecting myself for some reason. and it's asking what might that reason be, but the way that it went about it was very leading. So, not a fan. But I will go with it. My heart. I feel like that's the right answer, so that's just what I'm saying. If I let it in and truly believed his words, I might feel more vulnerable than I already feel right now. That makes a lot of sense. You just named something very precise. If you let the words in, your heart becomes more exposed. Okay, so this is just very surface level. I'm not getting anything out of that little line of questioning right now. So we'll see where this goes. Right now, there's a protective reflex that says, don't fully believe it, because if you believe it, the emotional stakes go up. So let's get curious about that protection instead of trying to get rid of it. Here's the next question. What do you think that protective part of you is trying to prevent from happening if you fully believe his love and admiration? Okay, so this is the question that it should have asked previously. Instead of telling me that a part of me feels vulnerable, this is a much better question to say, what is that protective part of you trying to prevent from happening? Solid. Okay, we got there eventually. I think since we've had our second baby, it's been more difficult to connect and really be with each other. We spend all of our days working together as a co-parenting team that when it comes to downtime together, I'm looking to him for comfort and connection and love. And I'm often quite direct in asking for it. But then when he says it, I haven't put the get shit done mode that protects me or holds me together through the day down. And I'm, quote, non-reactive like I am with my kids, who are a three-nager and an infant. That's a really sharp piece of self-awareness you just articulated. You're describing something many parents fall into after a second baby. The operating system that gets you through the day is still running when intimacy shows up. Okay, so just an initial take, there's a lot of words here, so I will read what it says, but again, don't love when a coach talks more than the client. All day, you're in a mode that sounds like regulate the kids, solve the problems, keep the house running, move things forward, stay emotionally steady, even when others are dysregulated. That mode is incredibly useful for parenting, but it has one side effect. It dampens emotional responsiveness. It's designed to keep things functional, not tender. So when your husband offers love or affirmation, it's almost like your nervous system is still in project manager / emotional regulator mode, not partner receiving love mode. Nothing is wrong with you. You're just still armored for the day. Fair assessment. The result is exactly what you described. You long for connection, you ask for it directly, he gives it. Your nervous system is still in non-reactive mode, so you can't absorb it, and your brain fills the gap with, he's just saying that. The words aren't bouncing off because they're fake. They're bouncing off because the armor hasn't come off yet. Let's keep exploring together. Here's the next question. At what moment in your day do you feel that get shit done / holding everything together mode starts to soften even a little bit? It may be late at night during workout, journaling, a shower, or quiet moment alone. Where do you notice that protective mode begin to loosen? Okay, so just a piece of coaching feedback. This is called stacking. When you ask a really good question, like it said, at what moment in your day does that protection mode or the armor soften? But then it provides almost like the multiple choice options right after it, and then it reiterates the question in a new form. Humans do this, so this is not surprising that it does it, but it's just a lot for the client to be with. When it asks a question, then kind of almost pseudo answers it and asks you another question, it's just kind of too much. So again, more feedback that I will be adding to the bot later. But back to its question, I really appreciate that it's drawing my awareness to, again, something I already know how to do because it's pointing me to a moment in my day that I already practice this, but I'm just not aware that I'm doing it. Okay. It's usually when I slow down to journal or talk with someone, like a friend or him, about what's going on with me. I think writing things down is the easiest way for me to lower the barrier first. But sometimes I don't have time to sit down and journal before talking to him and going to sleep. That's really insightful, and it tells us something important about how your nervous system processes emotion. You don't sit from You don't shift from operational mode to relational mode instantly. You process your way there. And journaling works because it does three things for you. It slows your mind down, it organizes what you're feeling, and it helps you arrive emotionally before someone else meets you there. So when you talk to him without that transition, part of you is still mid-process. You're asking for connection while your system is still crossing the bridge toward connection. Nothing about that means the love isn't real or that you're incapable of receiving it. It just means your system benefits from a small transition ritual. Fair. But instead of jumping to solutions, let's stay curious for one more layer. Okay. Here's the next question. When you imagine letting him see you before you've processed yourself, messy, unsure, mid-thought, what feeling comes up for you? Not a logical answer, the first emotional one. This question doesn't land for me, so I'm going to redirect it. I'm open to letting him see me mid-process. But again, that takes time and unpacking. Sometimes my husband doesn't have the capacity to listen to me process my day fully. I think the conversations are more impactful and nourishing when I've already done some processing. So then, instead of telling him a blow by blow of all the feelings or things I was thinking that day, and he's left with 1,000 words and no clear conclusion, he doesn't know the, quote, right thing to say. But when I've done that verbal processing already, then I can say, I experienced blank, these emotions, because blank. I need blank right now. It's way clearer and easier to receive on his part. But who has the time to do all of that between bedtime routines and cleaning up the house and getting ready for bed? We're back here again. What you're describing actually sounds very coherent, not confusing. You've identified a real dynamic. You process internally first, writing and organizing your thoughts, and then you communicate clearly. Then the connection feels nourishing. Without that first step, the connection becomes unstructured emotional processing, which is harder for him to respond to and harder for you to feel satisfied by. So the real tension you're naming isn't just about affirmation, it's this. You need a small amount of personal processing time to show up relationally, but the season of life you're in just doesn't easily provide it. 2 young kids compress everything. By the time the house is quiet, you're both depleted. True. So instead of trying to solve the logistics immediately, I want to zoom in on something deeper that you said earlier. But who has the time for that? I'm glad it did because I think I repeated that twice in an answer, so I'm glad that it picked up on that. Here's the next coaching question. If you gave yourself even 3 minutes of intentional processing before connecting with him at night, what do you imagine might change in how you receive him? That's actually really helpful. I like that it directed me with 3 minutes because that's actually super doable and I think it will help me. I think it would make a big difference. At first, 3 minutes sounds like nothing. I would never think doing something for 3 minutes would be enough to accomplish anything. But when I really consider it, taking those 3 minutes to type it out in my journal or break it down with you in this thread would really just open the doors to receiving, even if I don't arrive at any clear conclusions or requests. That's a really meaningful realization. You just discovered something subtle but powerful. You don't actually need a resolution to connect with him. You needed a small doorway into your inner world. Okay, this is a lengthy response, just FYI. Those 3 minutes aren't about figuring everything out. They're about softening the armor you described earlier, shifting out of get shit done mode and back into human with a heart mode. Right now, your brain thinks the options are fully process everything, long journaling, clarity, conclusions, or skip processing entirely and try to connect anyway. Black and white thinking. But what you just identified is a third option, a tiny transition that simply opens the emotional door. And that makes a lot of sense for someone like you. You're reflective, thoughtful, and you metabolize your experiences through language and meaning. 3 minutes of writing or naming what's happening inside you gives your system a bridge from parenting mode to partnership mode. The beautiful thing is you already proved it to yourself in this conversation. You didn't spend 30 minutes analyzing your day. You just named a few truths and you can already feel the shifts. So before we end this round of coaching, I want to ask you one last reflective question to anchor this insight. What might it look like to treat those 3 minutes not as, quote, another task, but as the moment you internally transition from mother managing the world back to woman connecting with her partner. Take your time with that one. Again, this feels like it's telling me about myself. In general, what I'm noticing is that if I were the coach in this scenario, I pretty much immediately would have picked up on the fact that if this client were having a hard time connecting with her spouse, it's probably because she's not connecting with herself. So we could have skipped most of these questions and gotten straight to that if I were coaching this person. But hey, I'll tell it what's up now. Honestly, I think it's more woman connecting with herself first and foremost. Then I can open the door to my partner, to my inner world. That's a really important correction. And that's exactly what this was. This was kind of a correction of the coach. So we'll see. You didn't say the transition is mother to wife. You said it's mother to yourself to partner. And that middle step is the one that has been missing. All day, your attention is outward. Kids' needs, household logistics, emotional regulation for everyone else, partnership, and teamwork. By the time night comes, you're asking your husband for connection before you've reconnected with yourself. Truth. So when he offers affirmation, there's nowhere for it to land yet. Your inner world hasn't reopened. That's why the world feels flat. Not because they're insecure, not because you're needy, not because there's something wrong with your marriage, but because your inner receiver hasn't come back online yet. Those 3 minutes you described are essentially a re-entry into yourself. And once that happens, two things change. You soften internally, so affection and affirmation can land, and you communicate more clearly, which makes it easier for him to respond in ways that actually nourish you. So the real practice isn't getting more affirmation from him. It's closer to return to myself before I try to be met by someone else, which honestly is a pretty profound relational skill, especially in this season of life that you're in with a 3-year-old and a baby. Before we close this conversation, I'm curious about one last thing. What do you think your husband would notice about you if you took those 3 minutes to reconnect with yourself before you turned toward him? I don't care what he'd notice about me. This is why setting up a coaching agreement is so important, because it avoids this kind of scenario of asking questions that really don't lead me towards my internal goal, which turns out was, how do I connect to myself so that I can allow connection with others? I like the practice that it offered me of journaling for 3 minutes about my day before connecting with my husband. But again, just like the previous coaching requests, this one is a little bit surface level and superficial. But processing is processing. And to an everyday human, having this conversation would help move them forward with some new awareness and action, which is a win. I will be practicing those 3 minutes tonight. I'm ready to wrap up. I think he would notice more vulnerability and he might feel less overwhelmed by my verbal processing and know more clearly what I need to hear. That sounds like a really clear and grounded place to land. Oh gosh, it says a whole lot of stuff that honestly I don't want to read to you. If you want to read it, check out the YouTube video. I'll scroll through it and you can check it out. But it's reiterating everything we just went over. Overall, I am excited to program the feedback I am gathering through this video about establishing a coaching request and ultimately like introducing it to my personal approach of asking deeper, more profound questions that challenge a client's thinking as a whole rather than just kind of shuffling pieces around until a couple of puzzle pieces click together and then the conversation's over. I wonder genuinely if an AI life coach chatbot is capable of really great coaching, but for now, this is very basic level facilitative coaching that I think provides value to anyone who just needs a little nudge. But I am curious to know from you, what did you think of this AI coach? What about the questions, about the reflections, about the overall direction of the conversation? Did you agree with my feedback? And if you use the link in my description box, did you have a better experience now that I've programmed it? I'm very eager to hear about what your experience is, so please do comment below. And with that, we've come to the end of today's episode of the Contentment Creator Podcast, where we put AI to the test to see if a chatbot can coach a life coach. Whether you caught the whole episode or one of our segments, either way, thank you so much for making it all the way to the end, and I hope that you are subscribed so you don't miss another episode. Join me in my mission to turn a world full of content creators into a world of contentment creators. Bye, y'all.